Everybody, welcome to Love Books. It's really lovely to have you all here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. And it's particularly lovely to have UJ Press here tonight. They're practically our neighbours, and this is the first time that we've ever done anything with them. So I'd like to thank Vikas, who is the manager and publisher at UCT Press, UJ Press. Yeah, thanks for bringing this book our way, Vikas. And of course, insisting that we launch it on the eve of Valentine's Day. Hopefully that's going to make you all buy a book for someone. I'm just quickly going to welcome Grace and Puleng, who are our main speakers tonight, and then they will talk you through all the rest of the contributors as their turn comes along. So Grace Khunou, of course, welcome to Love Books, Grace, is the editor of this book, In Jozi. She is a sociology professor and currently acting executive director at the Department of Leadership and Transformation at UNISA. Her research is in understanding the Black condition through a focus on gender, health, social policy, class, and social institutions. She's an award-winning author who writes creatively and academically, with numerous articles and book chapters in national and international publications. She's rated by the National Research Foundation, and her publications include 4 edited books, including the award-winning Black Academic Voices, The South African Experience. Grace, lovely to have you here, and thank you. Chatting to Grace and everybody else this evening is Professor Puleng Segalo. Puleng is a National Research Foundation rated Fulbright scholar and a professor of psychology also at UNISA. She is the incumbent of the Chief Albert Lutuli Research Chair. Her research focuses on historical trauma and the everydayness of gendered suffering. She draws from visual participatory research methodologies and has great passion for community well-being. She is a recipient of numerous awards, including the 2021-22 regional winner of the World Academy of Sciences Prize for her role in popularizing science. What a wonderful prize to get. So thank you so much to both of you, and welcome to Love Books. And now over to you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It is so beautiful to see some familiar faces. I'm trying to think where to start, Grace. I think just based on the introduction that has been put forward, we can already see the passion that you have for this work and how you're also taking it forward. We're in the month of love, and as has been said, it was very interesting and I think also apt to have this launch just on the eve of Valentine's Day, but also in this month of love. And I think speaking about love and speaking about the Black experience, one of the things, and which is what I appreciate about your work, one of the things that we always focus on, or the work that is being done around Black experiences, is about loss, it's about Black suffering, it's about Black pain, and almost assuming that Black people do not experience love, they do not experience desire, longing, belonging. And so for me, this is why this book is so important and why this contribution is also so timely, so that we pay attention to the various ways in which love manifests itself within the Black communities, particularly also in intimate relationships, in how we celebrate love, how we engage with love, how we navigate love. And I think as you also do together with the contributors in this book, to also look at the complexities of the ways in which love and intimacy also shows itself in the experiences of Black people, but also in particular around the Black middle class. You've done a lot of work, Grace, around the experiences of the Black middle class and your passion around Black families as well. But also this idea of the precarity of this idea that you call the Black middle classness. And I think if one thing that we learned from COVID was this precarity. We know the losses and how people's lives just changed overnight. And to say being in this middle position, what that does and what that means, particularly in intimate relationships. So I think maybe starting from that position, why focusing on love specifically around the middle classness or the middle class population?
Thank you. So, thank you. I think I want to just introduce the contributors briefly before I answer the question. So this is Puleng Segalo. She's not Tlanyani anymore. She's Kasiboni. And then this is Lesego Blanc. And then there is Manuela Di Mendoca. And then this is Dr. this is Dr. Skiepers, Katlego Skiepers. And these are they were my master students when we started this project in 2015. And I think the idea of this book is also around how to use love as a center of everything that we do. And I think in the work that I did with these brilliant young people was love at the center of that, and love of myself, and trying to reflect that to them so that they can love themselves and reflect that to whoever they interact with. So why this project? This project was influenced by my PhD work. My PhD work was on fatherhood and child support. And in the experiences, so when I started the work on fatherhood and child support, I never thought it would take me to some of the questions that it took me. So I'm an industrial sociologist by training, and I went into this project because I was running away from industrial sociology. But I realized as I started the project that there was a serious link between how families operate and how their workplace operates, and how a lot of other factors influence, especially the state and so forth. So I did the project on fatherhood and child support. And the assumption when I went into that project was that the majority of fathers who will have cases in the maintenance system would be poor working class men. But I found that there were also middle class, higher middle class and upper class men who were not paying child support. But the other thing that came up that I never thought would come up was that there was also questions around intimacy in how these women and men talked about the child support system. And what was fascinating for me was how and why is it that middle class fathers are not paying child support, you know? And so I was fascinated by, because one of the things that we like saying, you know, in popular discourse is that, you know, the poor are unable to do certain things because they are poor. Now, the question was, is that true for the middle class? Because the middle class have access to resources that the poor and working class don't have. So I engaged in this project because I was fascinated by that question, and also the relations between, you know, in black communities, there's deep connections between middle class families and working class families. And I was fascinated by what I would find, you know, should I ask that question. What are the kinds of things that constitute intimate relationships in the middle class? And at the back of my mind, the other question that I never asked was, are there similarities between the black middle class and the working class?
Thank you so much. I'm going to touch on something that the book is not necessarily about, but because you mentioned it, and I think it's so important. And as I was reading the book, I don't think you mentioned it, and I think it was very critical that you should have, and perhaps it's something to reflect on as well. The issue of supervision, and how also it's also a labor of love, because I think we look at love in its myriad ways, in the many ways that it manifests. And the fact that we have this product as a product of love, as you having journeyed with your students and having produced this, not just a qualification, but a reflection on the work that they've done and how they've interpreted the idea of Black middle classness and love. But also, again, just because I had a conversation with someone the other day and they were talking about the challenges of supervision. And a colleague was saying, sometimes, students have to deal with demons because some of the supervisors are really demons. And I think people have got a lot of stories to tell and to share about supervision journeys. And I think for me, that's a very important moment to pause, to think about how, even in the work that we're doing, it's also the work of love and what that looks like and what the products of that love could be. And I wonder just briefly if you want to say maybe two things around your thoughts around supervision as a work of love.
I think so. So at the time when I was supervising them, I was a very different person. I'm not the same person. And I'm currently supervising Lesego for her PhD. And she was telling Katlego, she's like, Prof is not the same. She's not the same. So when I was supervising them, so I think now I have a very different idea of self-love. And when I was supervising them, I was carrying them. And as in the process of carrying them, I felt the heaviness of carrying them. And I had to shift how I love. And when I was doing the project, even in my intimacy, I loved differently than how I love and what I think about love now. So I supervise them in that sense that, I need to carry them, I need to nurture them. And the way I supervise now is not the same. I demand certain things in a very different way from how I demanded certain things from them back then. I was a very hard supervisor, Katlego will tell you. And I want to make an example because Katlego he's just finished his PhD, he's a doctor. And the day he was doing his defense, I got news that he was brilliant, that he killed it, that the university, the faculty is impressed. But that is not the experience I had of him when I started with his master's project. And he also did not like me a lot at that time because I was very hard on him. There was a time where I demanded that he submits a paragraph every day, that he reads an article and submit a paragraph every day. He hated me for that. But I think now he loves me. Yes. So it was a labor of love in the sense that I really, really pushed them to be their best because I expected that they can do it. I knew that they can do it. I trusted that they can do it. And I wanted to be the kind of supervisor I never had. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the hardness came, where the heaviness came, because I wanted to be a different kind of supervisor, but I really did not know boundaries around that. And I think now Lesego is experiencing the boundaries. She might not be very happy about that, but I think by the time she finishes the PhD, she'll be happy. So love is also hard, and it has to be hard.
Okay. Talking about love as being hard, I think as you go through the different chapters, some of the analysis on the different ways in which people navigate love in the various relationships, intimate relationships that they have, that comes through as well in terms of how hard that is. I said to Grace, I'm just going to say a word or two with her. I'm not really interested in her, but I'm interested in the contributors. And I'm interested in the stories and the journeys that they went through in writing these different chapters that they've written. As I was walking in, I saw many people already have a copy of the book in their hands, and I hope that through this conversation as well, by the time we leave here, all of us will be having a copy in our hands because you would be so interested in reading the chapters. So we're not going to give all of it away, but we're just going to give a glimpse in terms of the thinking around the various contributions and the ideas around how you came to be doing this work. So Puli, I'm going to start with you, my namesake. And Puleng, your chapter speaks about something that I think many of us are grappling with. In academia, in the private sector, in the public sector, in many sectors, this idea of home-work balance, right? So women in intimate relationships, in heterosexual intimate relationships, and professional women having to work and having to balance the work-life challenges, yes, the dichotomies that are there. But you do this by using a case study, and I want you to talk to us about that, which is very interesting. That, we watch movies and we do it for fun, but you used a movie in a very analytical way in thinking about the complexities of how to attend to conflicts within relationships wherein a woman is earning more and the frustrations around that. So you draw on Tyler Perry, and I want you to talk to us about that journey.
Before I talk about Tyler Perry, can I just reflect for a moment? I need to.
Absolutely.
Getting here was not easy. Okay, can you hear me?
No, I think it's off.
Can you hear me now? Getting here tonight was not easy. I left a screaming toddler who wanted to come with me. I left an infant who I had to resort to bottle feeding instead of breastfeeding. And a very grumpy husband sitting over there because I did not cook. So, and here's another thing, I do not clean and I do not do laundry. I want to pose a question to the audience. Am I an inadequate mother and a wife, given the scenario I just posed to you? And I'm open for criticism. The reason I have shared this scenario about my current experience is because it's at the very heart of the chapter and what I was writing about. So I'll introduce also why I used Tyler Perry. My research topic, even though it was talking about love, it was more on the dark side of love, about conflict and about the issues that middle-class women find themselves in doing love. So then I was single and very young, and as a Black person, having to talk to an elderly woman about issues of infidelity, sexuality, and domestic violence, it can be deemed of as rather disrespectful when you are young and you're approaching an older person. So I had to put my creative hat on and say, how do I ask such sensitive questions and personal questions that some, view as confines of the domestic space in ways that I answer my research question? What do Black middle-class people fight about? So as I was watching Tyler Perry, I was like, I've got it. Life mirrors art, and art is life. Yeah. And people love art. So I then made a decision to research more about using pictorial vignettes. This is where I took pictures of the various couples from Why Did I Get Married, put them on a sheet of paper, and then to break the ice and to make life a bit easier, I asked the participant, of these couples from Why Did I Get Married, which one do you see yourself as? Oh, and side note, the criteria was that the participants must have watched the movie. So most of them chose the couple Diane and Terry. So for those of you who've watched the movie, Diane is a feminist who is presented as career obsessed and rather negligent over her husband and child. And I beg to disagree. I don't see it as negligence, but it's those hard priorities that she had to choose to go forward and break the glass ceiling. So the film was used as a methodological tool to try and dig into those hard conversations to talk about. And getting into that, boy, did I get the responses. I only speak about 2 participants in the story because the stories were quite wrong and we didn't have enough pages. But I'd like to talk about Mrs. Peaches. One of the characters in the books, she highly identified with Diane because at the time of interviewing, she was 2 years in her marriage and was just pregnant. She didn't plan the pregnancy. She wanted to complete her master's so badly. And she felt that she could not do this because she had to attend to now her role as wife and child. She was then diagnosed with depression because unfortunately then the masters and the vocation had to stop because of the kind of arguments her and her partner were getting into. So had it not been for those vignettes, it would have been rather hard to draw out those issues.
Sure. Thank you. I think you also highlight the importance, I think, of the methodological tools that you use and how those can assist us. And it's interesting that in your reflection earlier, and you're asking, am I inadequate? Because that's one of the things that I was also highlighting, that in your chapter, there's a subheading around the making of inadequate wives. How do people get to the point where they are deemed to be inadequate wives? And what is the yardstick, right, that determines what is an adequate wife and what is an inadequate wife? So when it comes to balancing work and life, how do you then make the inadequate wife? And what was your answer to that? What is the making of an inadequate wife?
Okay, this will have to get me to the overarching argument of the chapter. This will have to raise questions of, firstly, how do we define adequate wife and what is a wife supposed to do?
Exactly.
Gender roles. Now, these particular wives that I talk about here are not just wives and mothers. They are postgraduate mothers and wives. They are business owners, and they are highly advanced within their careers. Now, how do you become an adequate wife given those other hats, which theory calls role strain, where you wear multiple hats in your life and you have to push in all of them to meet those needs? In these cases, the mothers were perceived by their partners and in some instances themselves as being inadequate. They delivered vocationally, they delivered academically, but they could not be there to cook. They could not be there to tend to the home and its cleaning. They could not be there to socialize, like Kawekazi's husband always begged for. I understand our love as us being together and socializing. Her answer was, for me to get where I want to be and for our children, I cannot socialize on a Saturday. I must pass this master's in business leadership. So because of responses like that, the result of her marriage was then a separation. Not divorce, a separation, because the husband could not have a wife who prioritizes conferences, meetings, and promotions over their child. Their child also had to be sent to their grandmother in another province for her to be able to obtain these roles. So there was, in the eyes of the characters, never an adequate mother. And now this pushes us to rethink gender roles. We do not live in a world anymore where it suffices for women to be pregnant and barefoot, particularly in the economy we live in South Africa. One salary doesn't cut it. So if our men are not empowered or have those opportunities to fully provide where you can be at home, it means the woman has to step outside. And her stepping outside means that the time she would have spent in being an adequate mother who nurtures, looks after the baby the whole day, cleans, bakes, looks after the home, won't happen. And in so doing, then you get the labels inadequate or the making of inadequate mothers.
Sure. Puleng, thank you so much. I could continue with you, but unfortunately, time is against us. But I think the beautiful thing is also the interconnectedness in terms of the themes around the various contributions. And as you were talking about within marital relationships and having to negotiate, that at the end, we're sitting with this idea of an inadequate wife. And so, Lesego, I'm wondering about this inadequacy around the women who are single or women who choose to be single. So the black middle class women who are single. And also the ways in which then society perceives them and looks at them, and you speak about this idea of incompleteness, that it's almost as if you're incomplete. So the idea is, do you separate, do you divorce, do you choose not to get married? And how within heterosexual relationships these complexities then show themselves. And you speak about the role of patriarchy, but also not just patriarchy, but also capitalism, how it's also at the center of all of this, and how then black single middle class women have to navigate this space. And I think as you reflect on this, I would like for you to maybe start by talking to us about the title of your chapter, which I think is very punchy, the undesirables. So, single women as the undesirables. So black middle class women and unemployed men. Let's start there.
Hi, Prof. I think one of the reasons why this chapter was titled like this is because of the broader study that was looking at single black middle class women's experiences or perceptions around intimacy, how they navigate or what happened for them to be single. And one of the biggest things I always, when I do my methodology, I reflect around my aunt, Aunt Sarah, who was single most of her life, and she was regarded as middle class. However, despite of her being single her being middle class, she was always asked, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? And when she had a kid, why aren't you married? And she was constantly stigmatized. And it was as if the money she had was not as enough. There was something that had to add value to her life. And even with the women that I interviewed, it was like they were stigmatized a lot to say they are called amalifetwa, someone who has not gotten married, and others are still, married and they are left at home. And how we get to my title of this chapter is I asked one question and I had 20 participants, and I asked, would you date an unemployed man? I see faces here. They're like, I already have my answer here. And out of the 20, 19 said no, and I had one that said yes. And at the time, I was asking it based on my reflections a lot. I reflect a lot, Prof. So my dad was unemployed, even though he was not middle class, but he navigated around the working class. He became middle class, then he became unemployed. but he was a loving man, you know. And the women that he dated, they were amazing. They had money, you know, they spoiled me as the daughter. But in many ways, you'd hear them complain. And I could see this in the women that I interviewed, how they would complain about the issues of, I remember there's one story of Udini, who was saying, I can't, you know, this man is going to be eating my children's lunchbox, you know, or pocket money. Others mentioned that unemployed men are lazy, you know, but with this particular one that really resonated with me, Kamogelo, the one that said, yes, I would. She says, yes, I would, provided the fact that my man loves me, provided the fact that my man trusts me or gives me the attention, and he is trying to achieve something, you know. And she says this, that money can be there, but it's not everything. And it made me think about how the concept of decolonial love, you know, is surrounding the whole notion of what she's bringing on the table or what she's saying. And with these women, it's not that they said, no, I would not date an unemployed man. Some have. And they would say some would be jealous of them, you know, some would beat them up, you know, violence came through. But also that whole thing of, I think Puleng raised it, of saying we live in a capitalistic society where things are very hard right now, and we are looking at that aspect of dual income. And I could understand where they were coming from. But also, I still grappled a lot, you know, when it came to that notion. And at the time of the interviews, I had a young love, you know, I was still in a relationship with my varsity sweetheart at the time. And then after graduating, God said, no, I will test you. You will now become middle class, and you will experience, you know, certain men, and would you now date these type of men? And I tried. I tried. I still try. I still do it because I always believe that, you know, and the whole concept of decolonial love and how I don't believe that love is as transactional. But it's very difficult because even with our black men, for instance, it is difficult for them to open themselves up because they are known or they know themselves as providers. And when they find a person like me who's saying, or a person like Ukamogelo who's saying, no, I can love you as you are, it becomes something very foreign to them, you know? So yeah. That's how I came about to this title.
Yeah, and you do think that this, of course, then has to do with patriarchy, socialization, the ways in which men are brought into the world or to be in the world, and therefore being this unemployed man having to be supported by women then becomes a challenge, because how do you then navigate that and sit with that? And so what do you leave us with in terms of the implications of what you, or how do you make sense of what came out of your study?
I think we had a conversation at some conference with Prof. Grace, and I was raising my concerns or what I go through now as Ulesego, who is similar to the participants, who is finding these men who are amazing men, but financially they're not where they would want to be. Or some of them are, because of COVID, for instance, you know, yeah, how people move into these classes and they come in and out, and I would grapple with the whole thing of saying, but do I stay here? And with the whole notion of money, I mean, how dual income is like so important, but in essence, I think my leaving part today is the notion of decolonial love or radical love is as important. As much as money is as important. I experienced my father who, in every way, that man had no money, but he had so much love. I am where I am today because of the push that he gave me to say, I might not come from this or I might not have had this, but you're going to have this. and you're going to carry yourself in this world like this. And the biggest of all was he just possessed love for everyone. Even in this room, he would just echo love. And he was the most intelligent man. And not that he didn't try, but because of the structural issues that we have, it just limited him. But he was an amazing father. He was an amazing partner to his partners at the time. And I carry that to say, if I'm loved, or if we are loved with that aspect, the true radical love, the other things that capitalism or patriarchy tell us, they don't matter. Because what happens when money is not there? Do you leave your husband? Do you leave your boyfriend? Do you leave your partner, So those are the things, So was it really love? What is love then? So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing the issue of the structural injustices that lead to where people end up. You speak about that in the chapter, and I think it's a very important contribution, that, a takeaway for us as well. So thank you so much, Lesego. I'm going to turn now to you, Katli. And you bring an interesting angle. Yeah, the hot seat. You speak about middle classness and queer intimacy, and you challenge this idea of playing to the script of heteronormativity and how material resources then sometimes determine one's place within intimate relationships. And you speak about this idea of how that speaks to this top and bottom, and how that plays to these societal norms, and that what that means, and how do we get to that, playing to the societal script, right? That even though we are who we are, we're still going to play to this set script that is there in society. And I would like you to talk to us that within these complexities, or rather how these complexities in the study that you did, how did you find these complexities playing out in these queer relationships, and how they navigated intimacy?
Prof, thank you for that question. I'm still identify as a Black gay man. So when I did the study, I was broke. I was a student. I was a tutor. So now I am middle class. So I'm dealing with the question myself. I'm with a partner who is a student. He doesn't work. Okay. He identifies as a bottom. So we are doing this heterosexual script. So it's difficult. And one of the participants is asking us to redefine what that would look like for Black gay men. I still don't know, because we grow up in these heterosexual, patriarchal environment spaces, right? So, for example, one of the participants, Kutlwano, really talks to this because he identifies as bottom. So bottoms in gay relationship would mean someone who is feminine, right? And top would be someone who is more masculine. Just the name is that. So, right, so he identified as a bottom, right? But he had a lot of money. And the partner was top, right? So he didn't have the financial muscle. So the partner used the bedroom to gain back the power of being a man, right? And then you find Sohopoto in the study identifies as bottom and is okay with the heterosexual script because the boyfriend keeps telling him that, no, I'm the man. You do the laundry, you do the cooking, and. So in all to say that queer love, because we find ourselves in these patriarchal spaces, it becomes difficult to move away because we don't know what that looks like. Even the people who've gone before us don't even show us. What we see is the top does this and the bottom does this. right? We'll try with, different ways. I love cleaning, so I'll do that. And I see that as my contribution of trying to break this heterosexual script. But it's not enough because I do from work. So in some ways, I expect a home cooked meal. You know, so it's those things. So it's those things. So it is difficult for black gay men to redefine this heterosexual script. Now the question is, you're done with the PhD. Are you gonna pay the lobola? So it's these things. And how do you even go to the parents and say, Katlego should be the one that should pay lobola, but you're men, like, who's, We're also talking about surnames. Are you gonna take my surname, or what? How are you doing this? So those are tensions that we find in our relationships. So that's what I've had to deal with. Some are okay with the heterosexual script, and with some of us we'll try and move away, but it's not easy.
Thank you so much, Katlego. And I can hear the frustration, even as you're talking and trying to figure it out in your head, because I think it's also not just about the study, but it's also about your life as well, intertwined in these experiences. And I think for me, it's a challenge then for you, because then it means this work is not done. I think the chapter that you've written is a beginning that then highlights the need for this work to be done, because I think this is something that many people in these relationships are grappling with, are trying to navigate and understand. I have a friend, she and her partner, when they got married, the issue of the surnames. So it took part of my surname and part of your surname, and then put them together and created a surname. And that was the official surname that they then both had. So it's these negotiations that you then need to have. And another friend got married, and the mother was saying, but her people need to come so that the two families can come together, because again, it's about the cultural prescripts as well, that it's not just the two of you coming together, it's the two families coming together. So the two families need to sit down and be able to have these negotiations. But I think the challenge that you also pose is who then pays the lobola, right? Because that also has got implications in terms of the meaning of what lobola is. So for me, I think it just tells us that the work is incomplete. Now that you're done with the PhD, people always say, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself or my life now that I'm done with the PhD. I think for you, this is one of the things to consider, because I think it's a very important work that needs to be done, and it can contribute a lot in assisting people to navigate these intimate relationships as they move on in the world. I'm going to pause there. I think maybe people will have some comments or questions for you later, because I quickly want to run to Manuela. Thank you, Katlego. And Manuela, you also join this conversation, but from another angle. And I think as we're listening, we can see how all of these are threaded so beautifully together, even though they show themselves in these different ways. And you bring in this idea of the woman as the breadwinner. The woman is bringing more money, and what that means in the context of intimate relationships. In psychology, we have what we call or double consciousness. It might not necessarily be exactly relevant, but it made me think of that as I was reading your chapter. We often speak about it in the context of race, right? Moving in and outside of being accepted or not as a Black person in the world. W.E.B. Du Bois speaks about this, right? And so here, coming in as the woman who's making money, who's the breadwinner, who's doing so well, but at the same time, I'm a woman. I want to be taken care of, you know. and I think participants in your studies engage with this. That yes, you know, I make the money, I get my salary, but you know, I want the flowers, I want the, you know, buy me, take me on holiday. And how then the women then in these relationships have to navigate this, and what it means to be taken care of in that sense. And I want you to maybe just touch a little bit on what some of the things are that came out as you had these conversations with the women in the study.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. That's a good question. Forgive me if I mumble. I've had surgery in my mouth, but all is well. That's a good question. My study was phenomenal. My study was very similar to Puleng's, where I also explored women in heterosexual marriages and them balancing work and life, you know. And we know the challenges that women, especially Black women, face as they climb the corporate ladder, right? And the challenges that come with all of this. And so with many of my participants, I discovered that many of them were breadwinners within their marriages. And exactly like you said, you know, I experienced them saying to me that it's challenging because I'm bringing in all the money, and at the same time, I want my husband to take care of me and buy me flowers and buy me all these lovely things that my heart desires, you know. And I think many of my participants got to a place of acceptance, you know. They sort of accept that this is what it is. This is how my marriage is going to be, where I'm the breadwinner and I bring in all the money, or I earn more than my partner in the marriage, you know. And so, for example, one of my participants, she said to me, well, I want to be taken on holiday, but unfortunately, I'm going to plan the holiday and pay for it. And the family's just going to go, you know. Unfortunately, my husband will not plan it and take me away on this romantic getaway. I'm just going to have to do it. And so a lot of my participants grappled with that idea, you know. And for them, it was so, I can say they were so disappointed because of the gender norms. You know, you expect the male in the relationship to be the breadwinner and to bring in all of the money. But then, like we've been discussing tonight, what do you do when you sort of overtake your husband and now you're bringing in all of the money, right? Many of the women, they just got to a place of acceptance, and it sort of gave them a little bit of power, if I could say that. I could see that they drew a bit of strength in that, in them being the breadwinners in their relationships as well. But I think the most fascinating thing, and I know you haven't asked it, but the most fascinating thing that came from my study was how these women are now finding creative ways to navigate the dynamics that they find within their marriages. And many of my participants, they outsource everything. So, you know, like Puleng was saying, she needs to cook and clean and katlecho. Many of my participants, they have chefs. They have 2 people that clean their households for them. They have drivers for the children. And I found it so phenomenal. I said, this is modernization. They are modernizing the concept of marriage. You know, they are taking matters into their own hands. And while I'm climbing the corporate ladder, I can't be at home to cook. You know, one of my participants said to me, that time I spent washing dishes, I could be on my laptop making money. you know, and I was like, wow. I was like, wow, you know. She was serious. She meant business. She was like, I'm not doing this thing. Society expects me to be mopping and cleaning and looking after kids. I'm not doing it. I'm chasing my career. I'm passionate about what I do. I love the businesses that I have, and that's what I'm going to do. And so many of them, they've got chefs and nannies and you name it, they've got it in their houses.
Wow, thank you so much, Manuela. Flipping the script, to make it work for you so you can still achieve what you want. And still have your marriage if you're married. And so I think I'm gonna pause here. We have some minutes left, and now we're gonna open it up. I know you've been listening to everybody, so we'll just have a moment to hear your reflections, your comments, and any question that you might have for any of the contributors. Yes. How are we doing the mic situation? Do you have a roving mic, or should you perhaps maybe Oh, okay.
Hi, sorry, I forgot your name.
Puleng.
Puleng. So, Puleng, I wanted to ask you two questions, if possible. One of them is, do you find the experience different between the different black cultures in South Africa? And did that come up in your study? And then the second one is, so from self-reflection, our family started off as very working class, and both parents were working, and it was kind of like it takes a village, right? Grandmother, aunts, uncles all helped out because both my parents were working and everybody was working. So I was brought up by my grandmother quite a lot. But as we moved to the middle class, it seemed that there was a gap now between our family, my parents and the rest of the family. And it was no longer it takes a village. It was more on my mother to kind of raise me. Did you find the same kind of thing in the Black South African experience?
Thank you very much. That's an interesting question, and it just got me thinking about the biographical details of both. And I'll speak about Kawegaz. Right. She comes from a family whereby of the three siblings, they were the first generation to achieve degrees. Right. And of the three, she was the highest earner. Her parents were dependent on her. The whole family was dependent on her to provide. I spoke about her sending then her child to her mother so that she could tend to the child while she's, gain strength and supporting everyone. So now that I think of it, of my most like the highest ranking in terms of money, the participants, it seemed as if the onus was on that woman particularly to look after everyone and not the village. Even to the point of I don't know whether this is the right word, excluding or excusing the husband from taking care financially of extended family. That is what came up. Then the other participant, Mrs. Peaches, she was from so Kawegas is from a Zulu family. Then Mrs. Peaches was from a Tsonga family, married into a Tsonga family. Patriarchy was so important in her house, and her husband, everything, it had to be about me providing, you resigning from the academy, you looking after our home, and then most of the care was then also left on him. He was a chief engineer. It was left on him to tend to then his wife and his family. And her age she was 26 compared to Kawega's, who was 42. So I at that stage in her career, she did not yet have that muscle to do what Kawegazina was doing in her 40s for her family.
Thank you, Yebo.
Okay. Project? Yeah, sure. Thanks. It's Paleza. Nice to see you having done wonderful work, all of you. I know Puleng and Grace. Nice to meet other authors. So I think there's a question and a comment of interest. So I'm listening to this conversation and asking myself, what are my boys going to say in 10 years' time? And now inversely, when they start asking that, I want to sit, or like if their wives are saying that, look, you're going to be the one cooking. I think for me, yes, as a feminist or the woman who identifies with where you are, it would be interesting, and I would support that. But also, I think there is this interesting question that somebody posed to me, saying that, the young generation, and I think I'm asking a futuristic question, and hence I'm really not expecting an answer per se. Somebody said to me that the young generations, they identify themselves as pacifists. I don't really understand, what would define a pacifist. But in the context of our conversation is that, look, man, we just want to be chill. Stress us about getting A's and stuff like that. We don't want to be scientists, etc., right? And be making lots of money. Yes. So, and then, which is quite interesting, because then I ask myself, these kinds of conversations, are they ushering us also, in this future generation that will be relying on the robots, and what would then love be? Thanks.
That's a big question. I think we'll leave that for closing comments. Are there any other? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Hi, my name is Vicky. Thank you so much for the wonderful research that has been done. So I found some linkages between Christopher's work as well as Manuela. And I think my question was just around that. If your research question was, which dates an unemployed men, and 19 out of 20 said no. The thing for me that just came to my mind was also just the language of Indo-Damas. Indo-Damas has become a full sentence. When people say Indo-Damas, we all know what it means. It means that if you date a man who is not employed, then
who must?
Right? And we've normalized right? So do you find that there was some empathy around the structural injustice that we referred to? And I think the other linkage using Manuela's work was the work of the breadwinner. I think for me, it's so important to just go back to when you have to say breadwinner, you can never complete your sentence in isiZulu or isiTswana. You always have to say, you must have a breadwinner. There's just no language for such a thing from an Ubuntu perspective. The breadwinner, even just the word winner of the bread, I want the brain. It's so weird. So, what was the question? I think that something from a question, so I was saying, does being a breadwinner, is that synonymous to being the man? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then, some few comments from me.
I think that's an interesting question, because essentially when we think about the breadwinner, immediately you go to it's a male, right? We just think it's a male. So I think the role of the breadwinner is changing, as the dynamics of relationships is changing. And it's a good question. But I do think that it's changing, and I don't think the role belongs to a man anymore, because we're seeing women taking up being a breadwinner within marriages as well. And they then identify as the breadwinner because in some cases they are the ones employed and their partners are not employed. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Lesego?
Okay. When with the Indota must, trust me, they had no empathy. The 19, it was because of their experiences, but also again because they have been taught that Indota must, right? Must provide, must do this. The only person who was empathetic was Kamogelo, who was saying, "I would, because this is a human being," and she said, I remember she said something about, okay, if imagine roles were reversed, and men would say women must, you know. Who does it for men? It's always about the man. Like, imagine if you have kids and your kids are always expected to do this, and no one cares about, the burden that men carry, and so yeah, it was as if, why are you asking this question, Lesego? Like, how do you even think about, sympathizing for man? Because I'd say, but, think about this, he loves you. He's like, no, he must have money, They will eat our children's captain, pocket money. I mean, how do you say someone is asking for pocket money? And I'm like, but what is love, So, yeah. When it just comes to the breadwinner role, there's this notion that I always, when one reads on research or dated literature as well, it's that the female breadwinner role is not something that comes out now. It's a historical concept. I mean, when you check up Gogo, our grandmothers have been female breadwinners. It's not something that comes out now. They've been there. And at times you'd find even the money concept. I know my grandmother always would say no, but her mother would give my grandfather the money, and it would be like it's him. So we've always had this notion of the female breadwinner. It's just now as we are rising, it's rising with the whole thingy concepts and stuff. But it's always been there. And maybe just to touch on, we are a generation where we are so flex on things. We are finding young generations, or men rather, who'd be saying, yeah, no, I'd stay at home and watch the kids. She can go and work, It's okay. I will be the nanny as long as I can hold the card, So it's very interesting. It's interesting times, how 4IR is just changing our lives, how AI is changing our lives, how we are even transitioning around love, how we're thinking about love as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take last question. I'm so sorry. I'm just mindful of time. And then I'm going to give my contributors just one last word, all of them, parting. And then afterwards, we can just have informal conversations with them. All right. Susan Tabi?
Your project. Yeah, project. You're right. Thank you so much. Fascinating. Congratulations. Looking forward to reading the book, and well done, supervisor. So my question is what you ended up with, which was about the transition, as we're transitioning our understandings of love, and as the black middle class, there's this space, like I get this feeling of loneliness, there's this space of loneliness. Because in any transition, people are going through shifts and changes, and there's going to be that space of separation, of not understanding each other, of not talking, same language, and all of that. So there's this space of loneliness. So I just wanted to find out, and I think that space of loneliness can be a productive space. It can also be turned into, a space of rethinking a whole lot of stuff. So I just wanted maybe some of the contributors to maybe reflect on this loneliness, and even to the extent of the sexual, I think, issues around sex and intimacy, and how do we navigate that space which is inevitable in any shifts and changes in society, and also around intimacy. How can we use that as a productive space where we maybe, think through things differently, connect even more deeply.
Thank you so much for that profound question. I think it cuts across all the different papers, and it's a beautiful way, I think, also to then round off. So I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to comment on that, if you would like to, but then also to give your concluding remarks. You have the mic, so we'll start with you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. And you are so right in saying that there is this sense of loneliness. As I interviewed my participants, I also picked that up, and I sensed this loneliness of, it's hard, it's difficult to climb the corporate ladder, but they're chasing their dreams and this is what they want and they love it. And it certainly is lonely. And it with my participants, I did recognize and identify that it did cause issues where intimacy was involved, because then the woman was the breadwinner, then there's issues of infidelity, one of my participants, she did her MBA abroad, and so her husband then went outside of the marriage, and when she came back and they tried to resolve and go into counseling, he turned around and said to her, well, it's not my fault. You were abroad, so what did you want me to do while you were gone, pursuing your dreams and chasing your MBA? What did you want me to do? I was also lonely. So I also found that within the marriages, the husbands are also lonely, right? The husbands are lonely because the women are also out there chasing and working long hours, and there definitely is that sense of loneliness. How to fill that gap, I'm not sure. We don't have that answer yet. And that's why such research is so important, so that we can identify this gap and see how do we then close that gap. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for picking up on loneliness. And I just want to add on to it. It's not only a lonely space that my Black women participants found themselves in, but it's internal war. When a woman starts earning more than a man and taking on the responsibility previously labeled as of the man, she fights herself and she fights her husband, which I also want to speak about the word you used of transitions. The big question after all of this is, I know I'm in a room full of feminists, but are we really ready as women for the shift to be the kind of women that our education and our employment situate us to be? Personally, I don't want to provide for my husband. I don't want to give him my money, it's mine. And then, secondly, I don't want to be angry and tired. Because when you are a woman, even though you can miss a few dinners right there, but it's still going to come back on you. Looking after the children is still going to come back on you, and you have to perform at work. You are going to be angry and tired. And this was integral in my study. This impacted on intimacy. Now, most of my participants, I'll just use euphemism, but they couldn't engage in the third shift in their bedrooms, because I'm moving from the school run and the woman to me working now back to this room where it needs work, and then the loneliness again in the bedroom. So there's war and loneliness.
Thank you so much. Lesego.
With loneliness, I mean, with these single women, Prof. Nta, they did mention, that they are lonely. But when one reflects now, I think about the ages, because it varied from, I think I interviewed a woman from like 25 until like 45 or something. And those who are in like their late 40s, they were like, no, we're okay. We have kids, we have all these things, the society's church to keep us, happy and not lonely. But you'd find the younger women who are saying, hey, the streets are lonely. You can't always be in the streets. And they're like, if anything could come right now, I would fall in love, And it's one thing that that in closing for me, I just want to just reflect on as someone who has navigated the spaces, like Kartlach was saying, that at the time we were students, but then we got to experience what our participants are experiencing, and one would find herself lonely, and one would find that, and you're thinking, but I'm beautiful, I'm intelligent. Hey, bo, what's wrong? Even my grandmother's like, is there something we should do? Because these men are not staying. And only if she knew they're not staying, it's because of this class position that I'm in as well. And the fact that some men would be like, it's the first time I'm seeing a woman who takes out her card. Even my friends would be like, stop taking out your card. And I'm like, but these are black brothers or whatever, whichever race. But, it's like, these are men that need to be loved. And for me, that's what matters. And it's like, no, stop playing with your card. And genuinely, it's that aspect for me to say, when we are breathing back, is to breathe back love that is safe to the younger generation, because it is so hurtful when people are violated because of the class position. When they're saying, I'm dating a man with money, in must, but the things that they write on social media or the things that people say, and you understand, you look at aspects where someone would date a man without money, but they're so loved. And those are the things that I'm grappling with myself to say, but I know that my grandmother would say, no, a woman of your caliber for now can't just date any man. But my heart wants to be loved. My heart wants to be cared for. Right now I'm stressing about my PhD and I want to vent to someone. But I can't because in Dota must, But yeah, it's just breathing in back the true essence of love, the true essence of radical decolonial love.
Prof, thank you for that question. Maybe the question I want to ask the audience is, whose responsibility is it to make the home warm, right? And we're speaking about gendered roles. As we are all here, for those that are heterosexual, are you going to find your partner watching soccer, no food cooked, and you have to make the home warm again? The kids have not done homework. You have to pick up and also do the third shift, like Puleng is saying. So it's a question, and then, Lesego, if you are black, middle class, and you're at work, and your partner is at home, you expect certain things to make the place warm again, to run away from the loneliness. Otherwise, it gets back to cheating, right? Because this person is suddenly not enough. It's your responsibility to make this place feel like a home. It needs to be clean and all of these things because I work, right? Look at Prof. Grace. So those are the questions that I have, and as a black middle class person right now, and those are the tensions that I sometimes have to deal with in my own relationship. Whose responsibility is it to make the home very warm?
Thank you so much. Prof. Grace Khunou, we started with you, so I'm going to close with you again. So, Prof, we've heard all the comments, all the contributions, and I'm just interested in your final thoughts. And I almost want to say where to from here, but I won't put you in that position. Just your concluding thoughts, please.
So I think what has come out in the discussions is that it is complex. And one of the complexities that I want to share is that what the book shows is that Black middle class women, to become Black middle class, you lose things. And the same is not true for Black middle class men. Black middle class men, the class gives them things. But for women, it takes away things. And the question is, are Black middle class women ready to lose those things?
Yeah. Like the true academics that we are left with more questions. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the books that you've bought and that you're still going to buy. Have a great evening. Goodbye.